I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I told Nick and Marty this, but a long time ago, I bought tickets to bring my 4-year-old to Disney Junior Live tonight. So I'm here so I can go to Disney. But I thought I'd start out the presentation for those who don't know me, maybe introducing myself and my farm, since we're, I guess, not normal. Um, I have a PhD in aquatic animal health. I guess I'm a recovering academic before I started my farm. And I like to say that raising fish just isn't our job, it's our passion. And that's because my farm is 100% owned by me. It's 100% women owned. I don't have any investors. I've been around for 11 years. And so this work isn't just a 9 to 5. It's all consuming and it is personal. And those who know me, I think the reason why I've survived 11 years is because I'm very driven and put everything 120% into our farm. So, also, those who don't know me, I'll tell you a little bit about my farm. So, I started out doing, after being an academic, doing marine bait fish solely from broodstock all the way through to market. It was never done before commercially. It took a lot of effort and a lot of work, and we've done a very, very good job of it. I realized while doing that doing everything from eggs, broodstock eggs, grow out, and delivery to the bait shops, it's really 3 businesses. It's a lot of logistics, it's a lot of management, and it was something that wasn't really enjoyable. So we really focused in on, or I really focused in on what we did best, and basically the hatchery. Because without the hatchery, I wouldn't have the grow out or the distribution. And we really got very good at growing our warm water marine bait fish. So because of that, and because I got a lot of inquiries from all over the place to also grow food fish, it requires a lot of the same specialized staff, a lot of the same techniques, a lot of the same equipment. So we instead contracted on the grow out and distribution, except for some local people. And we do food fish hatchery as well. So see, these are some of the species we've played around with or produced commercially. Our bread and butter is pinfish and croaker. We had produced pompano for a little while. That kind of dried up, and we were growing more and more red drum. That market kind of fostered for a while, and it's really and it's growing a lot in the RAS world and in the aquaponics world. So we're very fortunate with that, and we actually have a lot of red drum in my hatchery right now. If anybody wants some, we're going to have a lot extra. So I think just like Joe and Eric from Pro Aquatics, who I don't think is on the call, we've kind of been there from the beginning. And Marty and Paul and Sahar, I applaud to them. They've really worked very, very hard to get this project going under very hard circumstances. And I'm very grateful for them for including me and others from the beginning, and grateful for all the projects that I have listed here that we've gotten to work with. I wanted to reiterate, like what Joe said, it's been nice that we're not just a vendor, that we're not looked upon as just, these lonely farmers who just supply data or animals to projects. That a lot of times, and more often than not, we're looked upon as really the experts in what we do, because we do this all the time. We don't just have to grow fish, but we have to grow fish that we can sell for more than it costs us to produce them, which is something I think a lot of academias forget. Most people can grow fish, but can you grow them at cost? That's the hard part. So at the very beginning, I think we were the first ones to do an on-farm research trial, or I'm pretty sure 100% we were, because I got a phone call from Marty and Paul in the middle of COVID, in the depths of COVID, when they weren't really allowed on campus, not much was going on, but they had this wonderful project, and they said, hey, we got fast-tracked money. What can you do? Well, remember, it was COVID. We had limited ability to order things, especially from out of the country, or supplies. And so we had to really think hard about what we could possibly do that would be meaningful at our farm by ourselves. We had them on the phone, we had them on email, but We were really doing this ourselves. So we decided with the capabilities we had, it would be really interesting to understand more about low salinity of Pompano. And you've already heard some presentations, and there's quite a few publications about low salinity Pompano juveniles. But there's little to nothing, or was little to nothing, on Pompano from eggs through the larval rearing under low salinity. And why this was interesting to me personally, besides the fact that we could actually do it on my farm with our replicated tanks, was for two reasons. One, there was more and more farms that were growing or trying to grow Pompano with limited access to seawater. And those of you who are in our business, you know that getting land on the coast with real seawater is very expensive, and getting land on the coast with seawater that's clean is even harder to find. So a lot of people either make their seawater, which is expensive, or try to do things with as little seawater as possible. The other reason why we wanted to do it is because Pompano are very susceptible to a bunch of diseases. And remember, I have a PhD in aquatic animal health, so understanding and monitoring fish health on my farm and other places is important to me. So amylidinium, which is one of the big nasties that Pompano can die from, doesn't like low salinity. So the third reason is because of my fish health background, I know that a lot of species grow better at osmolaltic salinity, which is the salinity basically of their blood. If they don't have to do drastic amounts of osmoregulation, making sure salts go in or salts go out at the right rate, they can actually put more energy into growth. So anyway, this trial actually ended up being 3 trials. It cost us a significant amount more money than we anticipated, but we were so interested in the results and we were getting such interesting results, we were all in. And I have to thank Pro Aquatics, who helped with every single Pompano study, because they supplied the eggs. And in this trial in particular, they went to a loss because they supplied us with 3 different cohorts of eggs for 3 different trials. This study ended up in publications with Harbor Branch. One I wasn't on, I didn't know they were publishing it, but the second one I was put on. And I think that experience on both sides of the fence, actually working through the project all the way through interpretation with the hatchery or the person who did the study, was really meaningful and continued through the rest of these trials. But one of the major results of this particular project wasn't published, and I'm hoping we will publish it soon. And so I said there were 3 trials. We took eggs from Pompano and we put them in 10 ppt salinity, 20 ppt salinity, and 30 ppt salinity. And they looked great. We went home, they looked fantastic. They should have hatched about dawn. We came in and all of the larvae that were not at 30 ppt hatched, but then died. And so our next thought was, all right, how can we salvage this project? So we very quickly took buckets. We had a bunch of food grade 5-gallon buckets all over the farm, and we made up 10 and 20 ppt salinity, and we quickly pivoted into, all right, they can't hatch at low salinity, but can the larvae then be transferred into low salinity and survive? And we cold turkey transferred these larvae with buckets. From 30 into 10, and from 30 into 20, and from 30 into 30, so that we knew that they were all replicated, and the fish survived. So we learned very quickly, and a really interesting result was, no, they can't hatch at low salinity, but you can immediately transfer them after hatching to low salinity, and they will do just fine. We then continued this trial, and learning that, we then did it again. We hatched them at high salinity and we transferred them, and we continued the project, and we found the biggest result as a commercial producer. We found not only did the 10 ppt fish have equal survival and growth compared to the other fish, they actually had a significantly smaller variation in sizes. And as Joe will tell you, or any commercial farmer will tell you, having to grade your fish a bazillion times is really frustrating when there's a huge diversity in sizes. You have cannibalism, you have inefficient feeds, you have all kinds of issues. And if lower salinity will reduce the variation in size of early weaned juvenile fish, that's really interesting, and hopefully something that will eventually help other studies. The next thing we did was the following year, just like Kevin Stewart said, and I'll reiterate, Otahimi has been the gold standard that we all use, but anyone who's been in the industry for a decade or longer will know there are big periods of time where Otahimi cannot come into this country from Japan, where I start getting phone calls and we all start getting phone calls of how do you have any on stock? Can you send me some? And so having a domestic supplier or even a replacement for Otahimi when we can't get it is really important. So year one, we did this twice, and both times the Harbor Branch staff, while they suggested a bunch of diets, they really took our direction on like what diets we thought we would be most interested in trying based on access or what we've heard or experience. So the first year we did Gemma and a Ziegler diet. Otahimi did much better than those two diets. So then the next year we tried Love and Invase Natura. And while Otahimi did better, Natura became really interesting to us. And as you'll see, we kept working on Natura later on. Those studies, we were supposed to, if one of the questions when you do an early weaning diet is, are you accidentally impacting those fish later on in their growth cycle? Are you doing something to them at a certain stage of life where it's very important for them to develop bones at a certain time scale, of immune systems at a certain time scale that might impact their growth later on in production? So one of the things that we were going to do, if we didn't see any differences between these early weaning diets, was to do a common garden experiment at Joe's. Well, as you just heard, Otahimi did much better. So we really didn't continue the experiment into a common garden. But one of the questions to do a common garden experience is how we're going to mark these fish. And so while we weren't really funded for this, we were given the materials by Harbor Branch and USDA, and we were really interested in how do you mark these really tiny juvenile fish in a way that the mark will continue, because you can't T-bar tag them, you can't implant them with anything, that continues for months later so that we can take them out of Joe's tanks 3 months later, 6 months later, and we still see the markings. And so we took 300 of these fish out. We marked them in a whole bunch of different locations. And the really interesting part was, as you can see here, marking them on their operculum just above the skin, we had zero mortality of these fish, and they kept that mark for months. I forget how long we kept them in our system. I can go back and look. We should probably publish this. But we had ended up getting rid of the fish because we needed the tank, and we weren't really being paid to hold them forever. So that was a really interesting result there. The next trial we were supposed to run was on looking at differences between L-type and S-type rotifers. That one became a little harder than I think we all anticipated. It seems like more people have mixed species in their rotifer tanks than they think. And so while we were trying to get all of our rotifers characterized at various labs and facilities, we decided to move on to instead looking deeper into this Natura diet. And can we actually replace live feeds for Pompano using Natura? And Allison and co already presented some of the results from this trial. I think we're still waiting for some results from this trial, but some of the feedback that we had at our facility was they did very, very well. We actually went and bought a bunch of Natura after this as a backup in case our live feeds fail at some point. And we've tried them on our pinfish, we've tried them on the red drum, and we've tried them on the croaker, and all the species do really, really well. So it's nice to have something in our freezer for if our rotifers crash. We found, I've told Chris and co about this. We found some really interesting stuff with the Natura that perhaps instead of replacing them 80% or whatever it is every single day that they're in larval rearing, another option would be to replace them, give them rotifers for a day or two at the very beginning. Maybe it's a microbiome thing, maybe it's an enzyme thing, we don't really know, but then cold turkeying them onto Natura and not giving them rotifers anymore actually has seemed to work pretty well. We tried it in one tank. Again, we weren't funded to do any more of this trial. I think Harbor Branch is doing it themselves, but we were interested at our own farm for our own personal knowledge. The other interesting part we found with Natura, which we gave feedback, was it did very well with the rotifers, but perhaps not so well with the Artemia replacement, which was super interesting. And another little temporal or nutritional aspect that might need to be dived in further. Finally, we stopped working on Pompano. Actually, we've only grown Pompano one other time since this trial, and it was for Joe. Unfortunately, you know, the industry expands and contracts, and while we were all very hopeful because Joe took that huge leap and being that domestic Pompano farm and had so much great press that I think we all hoped that there'd be a lot more Pompano farms popping up. But unfortunately, there's really no demand for Pompano larvae. So we really moved on to red drum. And like I said, that market has really been expanding for us. We've really worked on it very, very hard from the aquaponics standpoint, from the RAS standpoint, to understand how we can grow them better ourselves, but educate people so that we can try to get that grow out industry that we need really going. So Scott from Ziegler, I talked to him at a conference and I told him that my biggest pain with red drum is all the diets that we made for our ponds. And once we get that crumble, especially into RAS tanks, into aquaponics tanks, it creates a gigantic mess that it overwhelms the filter, it overwhelms the systems, it doesn't break down like it needs to for aquaponics, and we really need something else. So that actually, we're coming up with something else. And so they said, we would love for you to try this. So they gave us some diets to try in April and March of this year. And fortunately, Paul and co had a little bit of extra money to throw in to help pay to do this study on a 12 tank commercial replicated scale. Unfortunately, the research diet had a little bit of a storage issue prior to us receiving it, which no one knew. And we really didn't get great results from that trial, but we're trying it again. And we actually have all of our tanks full of it right now. And we're not only doing crumble replacement this time, we are do Otahimi weaning diet replacement as well with their easy Artemia diet. And today I think is day 10 post hatch. It's 5 days on the easy Artemia replacement, and they look fantastic, just as good as the Otahimi, but we won't be done with that trial until December 2nd. I think, and again, Moat supplied all the eggs to the red drum. I want to reiterate how grateful we are to be working on these projects. We are learning. We are trying to get these results immediately into industry, and we're telling our customers about them. Those of you who talk to me have heard me probably say you should get some Natura and put it in your freezer. I've talked about how maybe you should try some low salinity stuff if you're having huge variations in wild stock. I really appreciate the camaraderie. The one thing I do miss from being an academic is being in that environment where I can talk to other, academic minded people and brainstorm. And it's been nice having that collegial atmosphere. That's it. Thank you.